on Small is Beautiful. This is the title of a book which was extremely influential, I suppose, in the 1980s by an economist and broader thinker called Shoemaker. And his book was called Small is Beautiful. And it was very popular in leftist and right-on thinkers like myself, because what it said was that there's much too much emphasis on large, anonymous, corporate kinds of activities and organizations in this world. Huge conglomerates, huge United Nations or business organizations which crush the individual, crush creativeness and innovation, and are often like the dinosaurs, not fit for purpose anymore, that smaller, more agile activities. And he was particularly concerned with development aid and so on, that in trying to improve the lot of ordinary people in much of the world, it was better to aim for small, focused organizations or groups of people than large, highly financed, but clumsy and often not very effective organizations. It's I remember meeting Shoemaker and being quite critical of some of what he was saying rather rudely at a meeting or talk he gave in Cambridge, and I think it was more to do with his views on population than this idea of small is beautiful, because I think it probably is good advice. In many spheres, for example in politics, the small state, in other words, allowing individuals to create the rich layer of civil society where government doesn't take over all the assets and lead to a socialist society where the individual loses all sense of personal responsibility. That's not a bad idea, although when carried to extremes, of course, it's just free market anarchy. So in lots of spheres, and I myself in my activities, although I like to think widely and broadly, I also like to keep things on a reasonably small scale. When I've contemplated, for instance, moving from a very small house, which we've lived in for many years, to at times we could perhaps have bought a much bigger and grander house somewhere, and it was tempting. We drove past them and said, look at that lovely Georgian villa. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, do I want to spend all my time redecorating a house and having huge house expenses and so on? Small is beautiful. Our little 17th century cottage is just the right scale. And same with my garden, and the same with my other assets. And even with my friendships, I've thought it's much better to concentrate on having a number of really good friends, a small-ish circle of really good friends, than trying to expand and become a great host to masses of thinner sorts of friendship. So my world has remained quite small, and perhaps as a result my influence is not as wide, and my recognition is not as wide as those who have gone for a more ambitious program. But I found that it leads to much more satisfaction. You have much more control over things if it's a small operation you're involved with. And so if you're in a small project with 3 or 4 people, then it's really satisfying. If you find yourself part of a large organization, the satisfaction is diffused. And even with my writing, I keep it to myself and my filmmaking. I don't like the idea, for example, of becoming a filmmaker who just does one part of it, like the editing or the filming or whatever. I keep everything enclosed within a small sphere for myself and maybe one or two colleagues to work on. So I think small is beautiful is a really good catchphrase, and though there are some things which it doesn't apply to, I've found it helpful, and so belatedly, thank you, Dr. Shoemaker.